Hey, everybody. Welcome to the green room of DisrupTV. We've got some amazing guests, as always, here with our great producer, Vala, my co-host, co-founder, and of course, our great guest chair. So we're going to introduce them in reverse order like we always do. And more importantly, we're going to ask them where they're coming in from. And of course, what are they talking about today? So Elaine, where are you coming in from? What are we talking about?
Berkeley, California, talking about my new book, Unlearning Silence, How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully.
Thank you. Thank you. Can't wait to get started. Patrick, where are we today?
I'm in from New York City, where we are very good at unlearning silence. And I'm talking about the term FOMO, which I invented 20 years ago.
If you're not on the show, you know exactly what that means. So Thank you for being here. Clint, welcome. Where are you coming in from?
Hey there. I'm coming in from Sand Hill Road in the heart of Silicon Valley.
Ooh, actually near one of my favorite places, Sand Hill Kitchen, if anyone's ever been there. It's a very, very nice little tucked in place for lunch. So, well, welcome everybody. We're here. We're going to be talking about some amazing topics, and I'll turn it back to you, Elle, before we can kick it off.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on X at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, and our distinguished guests your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV, and we'll do our best to answer them. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO and founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV just about every day. He's on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, CNBC, Bloomberg. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist of Salesforce, but he's also the author of multiple books, including this bestseller, Boundless, a new mindset for unlimited business success, and a #1 seller on Amazon. But it's not about that. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational and insightful tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or reading or speaking at events at Salesforce, you can find him writing insightful articles on ZDNet and speaking on business TV outlets like Bloomberg. But it's about our amazing guests, and that's why we're here. And we've got a repeat. Who do we have coming back to talk about the latest trends?
Yeah, we have an icon kicking off the show. Clint Oram, Chief Strategy Officer at SugarCRM. Clint started SugarCRM in 2004, 20 years ago, to enable companies around the world to turn their customers into loyal fans. He now leads strategy, acquisition, alliances for the company. Clint was one of the original architects and developers of the Sugar application, and he focused on building out products, company partners, communities, and a variety of executive roles. He's delivered keynotes for customers around the world, over 25 countries, inspiring and educating about how they can grow their businesses. You can follow Clint, must have been an early user of X, at SugarClint, SugarClint. Welcome, Clint, to DisrupTV.
Thanks, Vala. Thanks, Ray. Great to be here today.
Hey, Clint, we're happy to have you back.
Great
And of
to
course, a Cupertino-based business. I'm Cupertino proud. So super happy to have you here. Let's talk about some trends other than AI. Just kidding. What's going on in the world of AI?
Well, but before we get there, I got to tell you, I'm still dwelling on the fact from the green room just a few moments ago, where Patrick McGinnis coined the term FOMO, right? My entire life seems to be driven by the fear of missing out. And to finally meet the guy who coined that term, I don't know if I love him or I hate him right now. But
he did it when he was a student at Harvard University. So we'll talk with him after your segment. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's really
That is very interesting. And the real question is it a FOMO on Gen AI or is it not a FOMO? And the real question here is like, look, people are really looking for pragmatic use cases that they can apply in Gen AI. And of course, there's other AI that's out there, right? It doesn't all have to be probabilistic. There is deterministic uses, like 1 + 1 could be great when it equals 2 all the time. So let's talk about like real things that are happening in Gen AI and CRM use cases, things that you're thinking about, what's helpful, what's hype, and where we go from there.
Well, on the hype comment, there certainly is a lot of FOMO out there in across the board. Businesses looking for how they take advantage of generative. I know I've got a lot of my customers talking to me right now saying, "Tell me about AI. Tell me about Gen AI," and I ask them, "Well, what are you looking to solve?" I don't know. I just know that I need to be using it, and I don't actually know exactly what it is. So I end up spending a lot of my time talking about AI and talking about kind of predictive AI versus generative AI and what you're going to expect out of them and how they're very similar, right? In that it's all about pattern matching in the end, and that these AI technologies that we're leveraging today look at large data sets, find patterns, and help you make sense out of those patterns. And some of those patterns might be machine learning based, where you're predicting the likelihood of a prospect to turn into a customer, the likelihood of a customer to buy more, things like that. Very, very much more deterministic in nature. But and then generative AI, which is all about how do you find patterns in large language models but turn that into content for your employees. And so where I spend a lot of time in there is right now is talking about Gen AI. Surprise, surprise, and just like you guys.
It certainly dominates majority of the conversations we're having. I was at IDC Directions yesterday, their annual conference, and at the macro level, they talked about 7% increase in IT spend versus 3% increase in GDP for 2024. In software category, 12% increase in spend in IT for this year, and I think that perhaps is a conservative number. They said in a few years, in 3 years, Gen AI will represent about 25% of all AI spend. So certainly a major category that we've all been thinking about and building for. And they ended their talk or thesis that Gen spend this year is targeted at 40 billion. In 2027, it'll be 151 billion. So, Clint, as you're
that's a lot of zeros.
These are a lot of zeros. Yeah, and it's infrastructure, it's hardware, it's software, it's aggregate. 151. So clearly not.
I heard a statistic yesterday that Microsoft alone is buying and deploying 30 racks of NVIDIA processors every day to simply power what they're doing with their Gen AI initiatives. That's an amazing amount of horsepower being deployed every day.
Stunning number, and you hear less and less about energy usage for crypto, and now folks are thinking about energy usage for AI, which seems to be a far more significant spend. As you're speaking, Clint, with your clients, who's driving the conversation more in terms of line of business? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Is it customer service?
I think it's all really. So I have the opportunity to spend my time with executives across the entire front office, from marketing to sales to customer service, and then with the IT teams as well. And
sure.
And here's the challenge that we're in today. This is why, in my opinion, Gen AI is as big as it is. As we've spent certainly the last 10 years, but arguably the last 30 years, collecting a ton of data. Sure. Right? If you think about every CRM system out there, every business automation system, frankly, everything around IoT, we're just collecting vast amounts of data. We've been data hoarders, right? And And to a large degree, if you think about a hoarder's home, right? Stuff stacked everywhere. You can't really find it. You don't know what's there, but hey, I own it. I got it. I got all this data, and that's valuable. And in every single, how do I put that to work? I don't know, but that's what we're doing with GenAI. GenAI is taking all this unstructured information that people have been throwing into data lakes, that have been collecting in their CRM systems, and giving you sense out of it. So here's what we're working on at SugarCRM right now, is we're taking advantage of GenAI to summarize all of that data that you've collected about the customer, all those emails, the meeting notes, the call visits, what they've bought, what they haven't bought, all this information that's been stored in the CRM system, and summarize it. Turn it into a quick summary so that somebody can come in and go, okay, what's going on? Is this a happy customer? Is this an unhappy customer? What's the top issue on their mind right now? And you don't have to sift through all this data to get to that. And then I think probably, and honestly speaking, that's kind of table stakes right now in the world of GenAI. Everybody's doing that, right? But the next cool parts that are coming out of that is it's really completely reframing the discussion around what we in the industry call next best action. Now that I've got all this data and I've got these insights, what do I do with it? What do I do next with this customer? What's the next step? And so these pieces we're building right now, getting ready to release here just ahead of us. This is what our customers are asking for, and I think we're a step closer to that vision that I've had of CRM since the very first day that I started in the CRM industry back in 1999, doing deployments of Octane software, the first web-based CRM. Yes, Octane software, even before Salesforce got started. That's where I was just months before, but I was working at Octane Software in the professional services division, and I was doing deployments of CRM software, and I ended up building this thesis that stuck with me over the last 25 years. What do I want CRM to be? I want CRM to tell me something I did not already know about my customer, right? I want it to tell me what to do next, and then I want it to do the easy things for me. I want a personal assistant. That's what I want.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, that's what I've been driving Sugar towards over the last 25 years. That's what I think the whole technology industry is driving towards, is we all want our own personal agent, our own personal assistant, who's going to tell me things I didn't already know, tell me what to do next, and do the easy things for me.
Yeah, book these calls, do this automated, follow up on a lead, touch base with a customer. And these are next best actions that have been there. But one of the areas that's been really tough is really user experience, right? You know, I mean, we've been like trying to get stuff to work. We've been trying to get it onto screens, and we're trying to get it on mobile devices. And we're like, hey, that doesn't like look right. And then there's just voice as UX. I mean, that's picking up like so quickly. So talk about this, right? That the shift that we're going right now with, interfaces, voice interfaces as the new UI for CRM. And, where else are we headed? Are you looking at spatial computing? I mean, I've got my Vision Pro here. I've been using it for the last couple of months. I mean, it's like,
oh, well, I can but yeah, let me hit on those topics. There's lots of great ideas.
We live in this town that might produce these, perhaps, So,
yeah, exactly. Who's our neighbor right down the street? Exactly. So in there, absolutely, voice is the next user interface to computers, and I will temper that a bit by not trying to proclaim the demise of mobile or desktops or laptops or the keyboard or the mouse or anything like that. It's going to augment, just like the mouse and the keyboard, or the mouse specifically, augmented command line interface with the keyboard, just like mobile augmented and replace some functions, but not all functions on your laptop. Voice and voice interfaces are going to become part of your universe, but you're still going to have certain aspect of your day-to-day computing where you sit down in front of a computer and you actually start working with the device and that sort of thing. It might shift from keyboards to more of that Tony Stark Iron Man approach where you're waving your hands and you're moving things around and that sort of thing. And I'm looking forward to that. But the voice interface, we've been playing around with it for easily the last 10 years with Alexa and Siri and that sort of thing. But even before that, the company Nuance Technologies was doing a lot of innovation work there for 20 years. A lot of foundational components that we've been building on. But we're at the point right now where you can just simply give commands to your computer. Tell me who my top customers are. Tell me who I should be visiting next. and through large language models and generative AI technology, and then all the voice to text and text to voice components that are out there, you're now able to really converse with your computer. And I think that's fascinating. That's exciting, right? You know, I'm a sci-fi nerd. I grew up on Star Wars and Star Trek, and I'm kind of evenly split between the two, leaning a little bit more towards Star Wars. But I envision a future where we're interacting with computer technology the way that we've always envisioned in sci-fi. Sci-fi is becoming just flat out fiction.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge shift as we go into those markets.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I mean, the real question has always been how do we get from here to the Star Trek economy? I mean, that's the hardest challenge.
That's you know, and
Well,
it's
that's our
going to be
job, right? That's the job here in the Valley, is to build that step-by-step process that gets us there. Sorry, Vala, you were saying?
Yeah, and your annual report where 80% of your respondents claim that they aim to implement AI across their organizations in the next 5 years. Your CMO and CCO, Chief Customer Officer, had a webinar that you shared with your LinkedIn network where, you know, there were definitely hard measures that we need to implement and with system access, awareness, measurement methods, and so on and so forth. But it was great to see soft skills as a focus area where your survey and your research and your colleagues place an emphasis to practitioners and line of business leaders that, look, teaching and training your teams, leading with integrity, being responsive, being transparent, communicating effectively, all of this is necessary for us to be successful. The technology is cool, but without the right culture and without the right talent and skills, this is a Herculean effort, and we may not reach our full potential. So can you talk a little bit about how the leadership at your company is emphasizing, and I love that, the importance of soft skills?
Well, it translates into everything we do every day. So not only our core values on how we guide the company and the way we work with each other each day, but the way we work with our customers and the way we teach our customers to work with their customers. You know, I think even though I'm a technologist and I've spent my entire career focusing on how to drive technology forward, in the end, business is about people working together. A person who's got a problem and the person who's got a solution, right? 100%. You've got a customer, you've got a salesperson. How do you bring them together? And in the end, it's about bringing people together. That business really gets fun, in my opinion, right? You know, technology is fun, but working with people and helping people solve problems, that's even more fun. And if you can create that sense of enthusiasm within the culture of your company and translate that out to your customers, you're going to be a wildly successful business. In fact, you know, I've been doing a podcast now for a couple of years called Fuel Growth. And when I started that podcast a couple of years ago, I was really thinking along the lines of how do you apply technology to drive growth within a company? And I was, you know, frankly speaking, expecting to talk a lot about CRM technology. And then
the podcast has morphed to more than that, though. So
and has morphed into so much more than that. And I tell you that the single consistent theme that has come across every single interview of every single executive I talk to is you have to have a growth machine in your company. You have to have a culture of growth. You have to have people who are ready to embrace change. You have to have people who are ready to connect with their customers. You have to have people in the right seats in the company to drive that growth. That no matter what technology you have in the end, none of it matters if you don't have the right people in place. And that was something that you know, you look back on that and you say, well, that's dead obvious, Clint. Of course, why didn't you think about that from the beginning? But it took a whole bunch of interviews for me to get there.
That's awesome. It's very well said. It's always about the people, always.
Go ahead, people. We're here with the founder of SugarCRM, Chief Strategy Officer Clint Oram. More importantly, check out his podcast and follow him on X at SugarClint. I'll still say Twitter, but hey, what the heck? So, Cupertina's own Clint Oram. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Very well said. Yeah, I mean, you and I thought we were going to be talking tech most of the time, and that didn't turn out to be the case.
It's one big case of what is that term we're going to be talking about? Anyways, all yours.
Yeah, this is awesome. So because we all know the term, we all use it. Patrick McGinnis is a venture capitalist. He's host of a hit podcast, FOMO Sapiens, author of Fear of Missing Out, FOMO, which is a term he coined, practical decision making in a world of overwhelming choices, his new book. Patrick coined the term FOMO, fear of missing out, as well as a related term, FOBO, fear of better options, 20 years ago in an article in a student newspaper at Harvard Business School. And he's added, and the term has been added to the dictionary, FOMO, and FOBO has become increasingly more popular framework for deciding or describing choice paralysis. Patrick is also author of international bestseller, The 10% Entrepreneur, Live Your Startup Dream Without Quitting Your Day Job. He's been covered in all major media, New York Times, Political, Financial Times, The Guardian, and so on and so forth. An amazing 2019 TED Talk on FOBO and decision making. He's visited, Ray, check this out. I think he's got your beat, Ray. Patrick has visited 117 countries.
Oh, I think he's got me beat big time.
Yeah, I know you've flown 5 million miles, but I don't think you've been to 117 countries. You can follow Patrick on Twitter at PJ McGinnis. Welcome, Patrick, to DisrupTV.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Patrick, we're really excited to have you. Articles have been written about FOMO. Journals have been written. Scientific studies have been done with FOMO. I mean, you're looking at the literature. It's crazy, but it's often associated with social media and memes. But there's some real implications that you talk about for business and productivity. I mean, we can psych people out with FOMO. So tell us why, and why has this become such a huge issue and such an amazing topic that's in the minds of every single business executive?
Yeah, so FOMO is, a term that obviously very much a digital age term, a term that we connect with social media and memes and cell phones. And it certainly is about all those things, but it is deeply tied into productivity because, of course, our phones, this thing right here that you carry around, is designed to steal your attention, right?
Time and attention.
Totally connected with mental health and fitness because you can find hundreds of articles written by clinical psychologists about its impacts on our wellness. But for this crowd here today, which you're my people, it's investing, it's venture capital, it's Bitcoin, it's all of, this Gen AI conversation that you guys just had, the Gen AI, it was giving me FOMO. I was feeling it. And I was thinking like, it's just amazing how there's always that new thing that shows up. Not that Gen AI isn't amazing, but it's just, 3 years ago, it would have been NFTs. Now it's Gen AI. What's next year? I don't know. FOMO rules many industries.
Totally. And you saw crypto go, specifically Bitcoin, from 16 to 73 yesterday. You can't tell me people haven't been watching that ride and that fear of missing out, while Ethereum is getting to 4,000, Bitcoin at 73. Folks who've been in the game, even for a long time, if they slow down at any point, are now having to manage their FOMO. We had Michael Saylor on the show in 2021, so we got a masterclass on cryptocurrencies. That's when my FOMO of not investing was at the peak after listening to Saylor. And then, thankfully I listened to some of his guidance. Now, 20 years ago, how does a student at Harvard, how does this happen? How did you come up with the term? What was the impetus for you to think about this extraordinary term, but a mindset and psyche that impacts all of us every day?
And the counter term, FOBO, as well.
Yeah, it's a wild story because I just showed up at HBS. I come from a small town in Maine, simple guy, and I'd been living in New York, but I was working all the time. And I remember the last day before my feelings of FOMO started, I took the GMAT, I got a high score, and I was like, I'm going to apply to Harvard. That day was September 10th, 2001.
Whoa.
The next morning, the world changed. And I remember just feeling like I have to do everything. I have to take, who knows what's going to happen in this world. So I show up in Cambridge. It's this choice-rich environment. I'm like a kid in a candy store. And I also have this real clear sense that I have to live every day like it's my last. And so that was really the impetus. I tried to do everything. I applied. Guys, nobody should be hiring me to work in a hedge fund. I applied to every hedge fund job. I applied to every marketing job. I applied to every job out there. I was at every company presentation. I was on every trip. And what I realized was that I was not having that much fun because I was stressed out and tired and anxious. And I started to call this feeling the fear of missing out, or FOMO. And at the same time, I realized I didn't want to commit to anything. So I called that FOBO, fear of a better option. But I also realized that I was at this place that was very special, this high-class problems place that's Harvard Business School, and that I would eventually return to the real world. So I wrote a satirical article right before graduation all about my two new words, FOMO and FOBO. And I figured that would be the end. But unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think about it, there was a student living about 7 minutes walk from my apartment. His name was Mark Zuckerberg.
No
I was
way.
FOMO. He was inventing the Facebook.
2004.
And then,
Right. Oh
Yep.
my God. You're kidding. Wow.
crazy.
That's right. 2004. I should have. I didn't think about asking you, did you know him? Because I know the year.
If you're
wow.
watching, Mark,
Yeah.
Fink
I
D,
just-
give him a call. Fink D, give him a call.
I just did an interview with his sister. She was great. But yeah, that's amazing. Great story. Great story. And you had no idea as you're writing the satirical article, this is going to change your life for the better. I mean, obviously you're an international best-selling author and successful speaker, and you've been to north of 100 countries. Any countries that you haven't been to that's giving you FOMO?
yeah, Indonesia, actually. I'm really keen to go to
Really?
Indonesia. So I'm coming at you, Indonesia. I know. How is it possible? It's like a huge one. How do you miss it?
They're going to have you speak in Jakarta. They got to get a
Well, the
business
book's
council in
out in
Jakarta.
Indonesian, so I would like that.
That's
That would be
awesome.
That
Congrats.
would be amazing. So,
Congrats.
what does it mean in businesses, right? How do you get that FOMO? Like, how do you harness the FOMO, and how do you use it against your competitors, like a Jedi trick? So,
Yeah, it's a great question. And businesses, companies bring me in all the time to talk about, number one, how to sort of assess and deal with FOMO when it's in a negative inhibitor, but also how to leverage FOMO, because FOMO is an incredible source of motivation. All marketing is FOMO, right? If you
Yes,
think about
yes.
it, what is it? It's a combination of aspiration, that desire for more, bigger, better, faster, and the fear of missing out on an opportunity to do something special. And so when we talk about business, FOMO at the end of the day, it's either marketing or it's a decision-making problem. It's marketing opportunity, if you need to be ethical, of course, but it's a marketing opportunity for brands to tell their story in a way that deeply connects. And from a decision-making perspective, it's like, how do we stick to our core values, do the things we're supposed to do the diligence we need to do to make a good decision, and not just follow the crowd and end up building some product. It's like, every company now wants to claim that they're a Gen AI company. Like, that's FOMO. Not every, I don't need my blender to have Gen AI, but yet probably somebody out there at Oster is figuring that out right now. So they shouldn't do that.
I remember, this is going before 2004, but I remember Andy Grove. This is the first time I read about an executive. He was, with Intel, talking about it's good to have paranoia. It's good to have a sense of urgency. And I wonder if you can harness the FOMO. I think it's a good thing. I think it's good for you to stay curious and interested. I don't subscribe to having that anxiety of missing out, but I think it's important to, so my company is one of the most active corporate venture capital entities in the world. Well, we've invested over $6 billion in startups in the last decade. We almost invest in a new startup every week. And I try to think about, it keeps us grounded, because, the open AI that happened in 2015, the world really woke up to it in 2022, but the company was 7 years old. So what's the next company that's going to build this amazing thing? And if you're indifferent, or if you're not paying attention, if you don't have a little bit of fear of missing out, you may not have blind spot that doesn't allow you to innovate and build things that deliver value at the speed of need, things that are relevant. So when you're coaching executives or you're giving talks at these companies, do they understand, or am I viewing this in that it is healthy to have a little bit of FOMO because it keeps you focused as well as curious, or how should we think about harnessing the power of it?
All right, Vala. So I love your question. And the reality is we have FOMO. There's the aspiration and the herd. The aspiration is the desire for more. The herd is the desire to not be left out, right? And when we feel the aspirational FOMO, that's the dopamine hit. That's what happens in your brain. So you can't even control that. When we feel the herd FOMO, that is the epinephrine. It's the adrenaline, the fight or flight. So there's a lot of feelings going on. The way to unpack FOMO is to remember that FOMO is a perception that there's something better out there than what you're doing right now. And perception is the combination of the reality of that thing plus the FOMO. And so, we need to, as business leaders, there's the fear, it's FOMO, fear of missing out, but replace that fear with facts and make sure that the difference between perception and reality is less and less and less by doing the homework. And that's what leaders need to do. You cannot outsource the decision-making to the fear. You need to reduce the amount of FOMO, bring reality closer to perception. And that's all the work that we have to do. And of course, at the end of the day, you're never going to know, and you will have to take bets. That's the job of a business leader. But what I see way too much is people who just run after stuff just because they want to be able to talk about it at, the cool event, or because they're afraid. And that's not what leaders do. Leaders do the homework.
Yeah, leaders definitely do the homework. And I think that's a very important piece, because a lot of organizations think they can just actually win on the hype and the marketing without actually doing the work. And people actually don't equate that. How do we see FOMO as a force for good? That's a very interesting point here.
Yeah, so it is an incredibly powerful motivator. It's the little, I always think of like the angel and the devil on the shoulder, like in a Tom and Jerry cartoon, you know what I'm talking about? And it's the little tap, tap, tap of potential and possibility. I ran the New York City Marathon because I went to the marathon. I saw it happening. I got all emotional. And then I thought, like, I have to do this. But I didn't just run the marathon the next day. I trained. I started with the 5K, the half marathon, and so on and so forth. And so what I tell people, again, back to perception is reality plus FOMO, is dip a toe in, learn a little bit about it, and replace the FOMO with facts. It's like I wrote a whole book about how to be a part-time entrepreneur. Why? Because I wanted people to, rather than just quit their job because entrepreneurship looks sexy and fun, I wanted them to start a side project and demystify and remove some of the glamour and realize, it's a ton of work, and then decide if they wanted to go full-time. So it's really about, again, replacing the fear or the emotion with facts, so we make better decisions that are de-risk and way more connected to reality.
And this helps you be more aware, do you think?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, better decisions. So let's talk about another term you coined, fear of better options. Is FOMO more dangerous than FOMO? And before you answer that, can you talk a little bit about how you came up with fear of better options, and then differentiate the two terms?
Yeah,
the candy store.
The term comes from trying to get my friends to commit to anything in business school. Like, hey guys, want to go to dinner on Friday? I have 37 birthday parties, so I don't know, right? And that is the thing about FOMO. FOMO is an affliction of abundance. You could go, if you go to a place in the world right now that is suffering, where people are really suffering, they may have FOMO. They have cell phones. They know what's out there. They don't have FOMO because they don't have the luxury of having options. The more power, the more money, the more connection and influence you have, the more that people are offering to you. And so what happens, and I'll pick on the venture capitalists who I love, but when you're sitting in a big fancy office on Sand Hill Road and you just get hundreds of entrepreneurs coming along, there's a real temptation to say, hey, I love your company. You know what? Come back in a month when you have one more month of traction, right? That is like, this happens all the time. And it's the way of kick the can down the road, because you think, well, with more data, I can have a lower risk decision. But what people forget is, as you wait and wait and wait, it could be that option actually falls away, that they just say, you know what, you're not a decisive investor. I'm going to go to, I'm going to fly to Atlanta where there's less companies like me, and they'll invest right away. So the thing about FOMO is that it is really coming from a place where people want to totally maximize their outcome and totally de-risk their decision. But that isn't possible. That is a figment of your imagination. There's the problem.
I am dealing with major FOMO and crypto right now. I'm telling you right now, major, because the fluctuations are so great in either direction. And I just, and a traditional investment expert isn't going to help me. I don't think. Go to a financial advisor. I'm like, they're going to say, don't even look at it. And that's not where so I'm just, I don't even know why I'm sharing this publicly.
I have it too. This is FOMO therapy right now, because I have it.
Yeah.
It stresses me out. I don't sleep well at night. I don't like
podcast. That. FOMO therapy, FOMO therapy. Get it.
I'm telling
you,
it's just the landscape is so volatile. It could be so good, and it could also crush you. I mean, recently it's been okay, but yeah. Anyway, I sorry, Ray. I'm just
Not at all. I mean, if
I'm
you
with
were
an
to look at
expert, so I need to figure out how to deal with the FOMO because it can be distracting.
if you were to look at capital flows, it is crazy. I mean, it's authoritarian regimes where people are trying to get their money out. I mean, it is like out of control in terms of how fast that money is getting into crypto. So it's a very interesting thing to watch. I mean, we're definitely seeing that piece on FOMO. Hey, quick question for you. I mean, it's you wrote the book FOMO Sapiens, and when we think about FOMO Sapiens, are we all FOMO Sapiens? Are there people that are not FOMO Sapiens?
There are. My dad has no FOMO. Like
What?
literally, I can't get him. I
skips
call him the man who
generations?
knew no FOMO. Here's how to know if somebody
man
has
who
no
knew no-
FOMO. It's really impressive. Congrats, Dad.
That's a superpower. Yeah,
It is. It is. He knows what he wants. The places where you tend to find people with no FOMO are places that are what I call, this isn't my dad, but low information societies. So I went to Turkmenistan, one of my trips, where there's really no internet, really no social media. So you can't compare yourself to other. Reference anxiety is like negative. And so therefore you're just living your life. I've also seen in places like rural Ethiopia where the people don't have cell phones. It's like the more data you have coming in where you can compare your present state to a potential desired state, that's when you get triggered. So one of the really powerful things you can do is just like reduce the amount of data that triggers you, and then you can be less of a FOMO sapiens. But ambitious people are FOMO sapiens. And we look out into the world. Every time I go on LinkedIn, I get triggered because I see my classmates from HBS doing magical things. I don't think about the hard work or the the trade-offs or what stinks about it. I just think about like, wow, the shiny, bright object. And so that's our work as individuals, is to combat that with facts.
Well, hey, last question.
Well, when your classmate is Zuckerberg, I mean, I can see how going on LinkedIn may not be
just hanging out at some
trigger.
prime minister, hanging out some major Indian wedding with a prime minister or something.
It's not as good as it looks.
So you're on season 11 of FOMO Sapiens. Will Pat GPT be predominant in season 12?
I love it that you know that. So yeah, I have a new segment I created called Pat GPT, which
this is the replacement for me. See, you're going to get rid of me. And
listen, if anyone's going to leave here for AI, I'll be the one that's going to get bumped. So, but anyway, Pat GPT, let's hear more about that.
I just, I try to do, so I do an interview every Thursday. We have like folks like Scott Galloway's coming on in a couple of weeks, who I know you've had on the show.
He's great.
Just folks like that. Great people. And, I've also talked a lot about AI because I'm involved in some, I'm an advisor of a company called Invisible that's really exciting. So I love that stuff. But, what do I love about ChatGPT? It helps me solve problems. It gives me advice about things. It generates ideas. And so every Tuesday for 10 minutes, I pick a topic that my listeners care about and I generate. And I tell you my hot takes and I give it to you straight. And so that's kind of what I've been doing. And so yeah, Pat GPT, as long as I continue to have ideas, I guess it'll be there.
That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, the nature of computing has changed, and this is why companies like NVIDIA, are doing well. It's no longer retrieval; it's retrieval and generation combined in real time. What are some of the surprises as you've been playing with these tools to not only enhance your contextual understanding of topics that interest you, but how accurate are they, and are you a better prompt engineer now because you can embed questions within questions to have a more precise access to the output? What are some of the lessons?
Definitely prompt engineering. I've improved. I've also seen, so I've seen how a model is trained, which has really taught me. But what I found funny is it's definitely getting better for sure. The whiz bang factor of the first times you use it goes down, and then it just becomes like another tool you use. But it does still say that I was Dr. Patrick J. McGinnis when I invented FOMO, which I was not. Nobody should look to me as a doctor. I appreciate it. So there is those hallucinations that happen. And I do think that like it will not do everything for us. And so there's a lot of hype around it. And there's a lot of trash companies. And if you have some company that can't get funded and you say it's Gen AI and you can raise money right now, like those days will go away. But as a tool and as a co-pilot, as a way to especially translate things, I translate all the time. I love it. I use it all the time. I pay for ChatGPT. And, that's why my homage to it is ChatGPT.
Yeah, you know, I used to have a lot of interns that worked in my group. I was a CMO and we had a budget, so we hired interns. You know, it feels like having interns. You know, I would assign something to an intern. I would never take the output and share without analyzing it myself. So there was definitely me in between. But over time, the interns learn my habits, learn my preferences, and what they would produce to me would be lighter edit. So I just feel like a bunch of interns. You have a bunch of interns now. Everybody has interns. You still need a person in the middle, and it's getting better because the interns learn over time. Yeah, so it's pretty awesome.
Best part, Vala, those interns don't leave. The knowledge still stays with them.
They don't want to go to Bali. They don't want to do that.
Right. I lost all the interns. Again, we would hire good interns, so they had options. That's true, Ray. That's true.
We're here with Patrick McGinnis, co-founder and coach at XQuotient, founder of the term FOMO and FOBO. And of course, you can follow him on Twitter at PJ McGinnis and catch the FOMO Sapiens podcast. It's season 11, which is awesome. Amazing. Can't believe you're running a podcast that long. Thanks for being on the show and happy Friday.
Thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.
You're great. Terrific.
Wow. Cool. 11 seasons. Cool. Think about that. That's crazy.
Not often we get to meet inventors of terminology that, you know, ends up in the dictionary.
And people with a podcast longer than us.
I know. We're only 8 years. Yeah, we got to, you know.
Look at all this FOMO happening between the two of you.
Right. Exactly. Ray just triggered it. Thanks, Ray. Okay, this is our cleanup hitter spot where someone comes in and hits a grand slam with their shared wisdom. And we're honored to have Elaine Lin Hering, author of Unlearning Silence, a book I should have read in high school. How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, and Live More Fully. I was an introvert, so I've been quiet most of my life. Elaine is an author and a speaker, works with organizations and individuals to build skills in communication, collaboration, and conflict management. Elaine has worked on 6 continents. I don't know if she's been to 117 countries, but 6 continents, and facilitated executive education at institutions like Harvard, Dartmouth, Tufts, Berkeley, UCLA. Elaine's former advanced training director for the Harvard mediation program and a lecturer on law at Harvard Law School. Elaine's clients include small companies like American Express, Chevron, Google, Nike, Novartis, PayPal, Pixar, and Red Cross. You know, I don't know if you've heard of these companies. You can follow Elaine on X/Twitter at full name, Elaine Lin Hering. Welcome, Elaine, to DisrupTV.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, we're excited to have you here. And, you know, we always love to know the origin story of why someone writes a book. And, you know, and we're actually really excited because we're getting to talk to you before the book is even released. I think the book comes out like on Monday. So Tuesday. So you're all getting ready for that. So why'd you write the book, right? What was the impetus? You know, what was there like a moment that just sparked in you, or is it a class that you were teaching, something that you saw with a client? So what was the kickoff point?
Those soft skills that Clint was talking about in the earlier segment, I was teaching them skills. How do you negotiate? How do you have difficult conversations? How do you give and receive feedback? Doing training workshops. Again, I'm trained as a lawyer, fell into leadership development, ended up doing that. Think the tools and concepts out of the Harvard Negotiation Project from my colleagues there are sound. And notice that some people still didn't negotiate. Some people still didn't have the difficult conversations. Some people still didn't give and receive feedback, no matter how much HR and their manager told them they should. So, of course, we ask a good question. What gives? Why is that? And I landed on silence. We each have learned to stay silent. Often in our careers, we're rewarded for staying silent, right? Not rocking the boat, being easy to work with, being a team player. And of course, the way that we lead and interact with one another often silences us, even if we're well-intentioned leaders who are like, I'm here to support you. Right? The power differential means that the people who report to us don't necessarily tell us what they really think. They're telling us what they think we want to hear. So I wrote a book.
That's, you know, I need your book. I needed it a long time ago. I was at a conference yesterday, a few thousand people. One of the executives, host of the conference, spotted me and came to me and said, "Oh, we look forward to you asking questions of our panel. And I'll make sure I'll call you out if you ask questions." And all along, I'm sitting there and I didn't raise my hand. I didn't ask a question. I just I didn't know how to, maybe lack of courage, whatever the reason. And that's all my schooling, the kid who just didn't speak up. And then even at work, until I became a people manager and I realized that I can't promote silence behavior. So what I used to do when I had my staff meetings, I would call on the most junior person in the room to speak or answer a question I may have. So I wouldn't go to my direct reports, because I also felt if it was a direct report who spoke first, he or she could dominate the point of view of the topic. So, but I just realized, why is it difficult to speak up at work? Like how do we develop the muscles so that we can live a more full life, as your title indicates?
Let's start with why we learn silence in the first place. And maybe we'll ask you for your life story, Vala, of why you were that kid and what happened. But you just described it, right? You described how we learn silence, whether that's introversion, whether that's you're the youngest child, whether it is cultural, right? I am an immigrant from Taiwan. To respect my elders means to not question them, not question authority. You get rewarded for that, which is why then you're a great entry-level hire, great intern that's going to get replaced by Pat GPT, but you don't enter the senior ranks. And of course, that power differential that you're talking about, why is it hard to speak up at work? Because the real and perceived costs are there. I love what Patrick was saying about perception and reality. Both the perceived and the real costs to speaking up are there, and they are disproportionate for people who carry subordinated identities in a context, meaning you're not part of the dominant group. In tech, obviously, that means that you are not male, you are not white. And anytime you carry a subordinated identity, you've got an uphill battle, because you may not know what the norms are. You're more likely to be othered. And human nature is that we tend to like to work with, are more likely to say yes to people who look and sound like us. So all those factors are at play. And that leads to the origin story as well. Most of the advice around speaking up essentially boils down to just do it. And as much as I love Nike, that leaves out so much nuance, so much reality about how the stakes, real and perceived, are different for people. So for me, it's really, how do we solve for the underlying issue, which is the silence we've learned, and the ways that we continue to perpetuate silence?
It's a great point. I'll take my Taiwanese to level yum yum kwai kwai. But
Yes.
what we have here is like, there's certain groups that have been silenced over the years, right? Women being one of them. Other certain groups that you're talking about. If you're not the cultural dominant group in an area. I remember being in Detroit, and I was definitely not a dominant minority, right? Some cities, like it's diverse. In some countries, like you could be in Chinese in Indonesia, you'd feel the same kind of thing. It's definitely that kind of effect. So it spans all across the world. How do you change that reality? Like what can you do to give people tools? I know that some of that's in your book, but just share with us some of those insights.
Yeah, let's do the overview first, because the more accurate view is it's not a personal flaw if you're not getting heard. Right? So 3 levers. What can we do differently individually? What can we as leaders do differently so that the people we manage and influence aren't silenced? And then how is silence baked into our policies and practices, into the systems that we all are part of or operate in? So for myself, it would actually start with the premise of, if I had a voice, what would that sound like? What would I do differently? Even the assumption or the understanding that we each have a voice sometimes is missing, because maybe my validity or legitimacy, I think, only comes from doing your bidding, right? Saying what my manager thinks I want to do, towing the party line. As a leader, a lot of the moves that Vala was talking about help build that culture of voice. But one very concrete thing leaders can do is, instead of saying, what do you think? Or assuming that people on your team will speak up, use standard questions, right? What do you think triggers these fear responses of, well, how candid do you really want me to be? Do you really want to know, right? Is this going to come back and bite me? Versus if you asked, what about this idea works? What about this idea doesn't work? What are the pros? What are the cons? You're baking in the opportunity for a different perspective, rather than someone having to take the risk to read the code to say, does Ray really want to know? And then, of course, on the culture front, silence breeds silence and voice inspires voice. So the less people see senior leaders talking, or even having an intelligent conversation and debate, the more this idea of organizational silence, meaning the collective phenomenon of saying nothing, starts to calcify. Right? People tell the story of, oh, I guess we don't talk about these things here because I don't see my leaders doing it. Versus maybe those conversations happen behind closed doors, behind the scenes. And how do we actually introduce the idea that we do it? Well, we can tell strategic stories of the time that Vala pushed back on Ray behind closed doors. And here's where we got, right? We've got to inject data points that say, we do actually talk about things here.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense.
Do you think people that are more self-aware tend to be more silent? And then how much do you think imposter syndrome plays into unlearning silence? Sometimes, I'm in a room and I can immediately tell the person is speaking just because they want to hear themselves speak. And so there's a pattern of speaking, but they're not adding value to the conversation. And yet they're comfortable speaking, which at times I admire. I'm like, you know what? Yeah. I think I have something to say, and I'm not saying it. So something's holding me back. And for me, I think it's imposter syndrome. But again, people assume because you're on social media or you've written a book or you have a podcast or you have evangelist in your title, you like to speak, and I don't. That's a whole other. Again, I don't know why I'm admitting all this live to a few thousand people.
This is what I love about the topic. You are unlearning silence before our eyes, Vala. Your life story is coming out.
Did you know this was an intervention, Vala?
I'm trying to get as much guidance from you in 20 minutes as possible because
Vala, this was an intervention. Didn't you know?
Yeah, right.
And it's an intervention because we care about you.
Yeah, thanks, Al. I know our producer is behind this. Anyway, but I do think so. The reason I asked about self-aware, the people that I know, it seems like the really smart people that I know speak less but say more. When they do inject themselves in a conversation, it's profound, it makes sense, it's relevant. And a few people, like my boss, and Ray knows him, he is super introvert, I think. And so his superpower is people underestimate how much he knows because he doesn't speak a lot. But when he does speak, you realize, my goodness, he's like a chess player who's 6 steps ahead. So I assumed you didn't know a lot about this topic because you weren't weighing in. But then when you weighed in, I realized, my goodness, you're a week ahead of me. So anyway, that's why I think self-aware seems to be,
I'd argue that unlearning silence does not mean you say everything all the time to everyone. The world is too noisy and complex for that. Sure. And so chapter 3 of the book is actually when silence makes sense, because as a matter of self-preservation or self-care or playing the long game, getting enough social capital, all of that, it makes sense that you might not say, that you wouldn't buy into the Babel hypothesis of leadership, right? That says the people who talk the most have the most leadership potential. And the role that we all collectively can play is to also not buy into that and code chattiness as leadership potential, but that's a conversation for another time. The piece that I'm not sure we're yet aware of that I hope the book prompts people to is, are you aware of your own relationship with silence? Right? We learned silence over time. We built habits and patterns that are often unconscious to us. Put me in a room with certain people who remind me of my uncle, and I immediately shrink back to being 6 years old. How much of that plays out for each of us and what assumptions drive our behaviors in the moment? The difference between silence that is additive or that undercuts you is agency. So are you aware that you're using silence intentionally for strategic reasons? Or is it that you're going on autopilot and you don't even realize that it's happening? And then, of course, as a leader, people watch and say, well, Vala's not saying anything. I guess we don't say anything around here. And then you end up with a Boeing situation, right?
Nothing's going wrong. We can outsource everything. McDonnell Douglas.
Pat GPT. Will regurgitate but won't generate, apparently.
I mean, hey, who's going to know the difference?
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm still
yeah.
betting Ray's going to replace me with a Gen AI assistant, but
No,
time
no.
will tell. Time will tell.
Only,
irreplaceable.
only if this intervention, Vala, doesn't work.
Right.
Oh my. Who would have known? No, but hey, we really like the book, right? And I think you also mentioned a point here in your book, like why keeping quiet could make you sick. And I bring that up because like I think in a lot of sense that holding it in, right, could be some of it, but and on the flip side, you also talk about why some people are silent for survival reasons. So let's play between the tug and pull, the push and pull against those kind of phenomena that are there.
Yeah, so let's actually go back. I'm going to invoke my lawyer training here of a good definition of silence, because there is generative silence that we need for mindfulness and also the pause between stimulus and response. We'll all take a deep breath right now, moment of silence, right? We could all benefit from that. Those are Ray's superpowers coming out. I understand why people were calling him Batman and Robin. But the silence I'm talking about is when there's not enough room in the conversation for you, not enough room for your preferences, your thoughts. So you feel like you have to edit yourself out. It's when you're not invited to the meeting or you didn't think you could ask. And people don't even notice that you're not there, because silence is by nature an absence of thought, absence of idea, right? You don't know what innovation you're missing out on because you never knew what could be. So if we're silencing ourselves, meaning having to hide a part of our identity or watch what we have to say, our nervous systems are chronically on high alert. And it results in levels of stress that manifest in skin rashes and hives and digestive issues and chronic fatigue. So one aspect is, do I walk around on pins and needles? Do I feel like it is safe here? If not, my nervous system is on chronic high alert, and we know that we're not supposed to live at that level. The other health impact is social isolation. Because I don't think anyone else has these same fears, worries, issues, because no one else is talking about it, I think it's imposter syndrome, when really it's a systemic issue of norms that don't serve me and a system that wasn't built for me, right? We internalize the problem as I am the problem, and we are further isolated. And of course, we can thank our Surgeon General for the research around social isolation and loneliness being comparable to smoking and obesity in terms of shortening one's lifespan. So it's not just the soft skill, it is a real health impact of then what can we do about it, which leads us back to what can I do as a leader, and then taking a good hard look at our systems. Who do they support and who do they silence?
Very powerful message. Wow. Thank you. This is
sure
to be a bestseller. Great.
Did we do the mic drop that you were hoping for in this segment?
Yeah, no, grand slam. You certainly did that.
But you know what? I think there's some cultural piece to this, right? So let's think back. You have it on your LinkedIn profile. You're sitting here as a high school student, Miramonte High School, right? And your teachers are basically telling you, like, shut up and listen, right? They're not inspiring curiosity. They're not asking. Not that your high school is doing that. I don't know for sure, but like in some high schools, they just want to push the material down your throat. They're not trying to understand the concepts. They don't inspire that type of curiosity, right? And most schools are like that. It's just one way push learning, and very, very didactic, very little experiential, very little, sharing of ideas and actually getting people to frame arguments. And so we're like raising a whole culture of folks that are just like, okay, that's great.
And it starts earlier than high school, right? You wouldn't have made it high school if you didn't do the standardized testing.
You've been thrown out. You've been thrown out.
Totally. No, I have a son in middle school. It definitely starts before high school, right? Definitely.
Yeah. My son's in kinder right now. Right?
Wow.
We need order, we need control. And to be clear, this is why the systems conversation and the impact of systems is so important, because the teachers who implement those norms and rules in the classroom are also operating in the context of, well, we need funding. And though that funding is related to standardized tests and class size and classroom management, right? Totally. And so for me, the opportunity is, can we take a honest look at the impacts over time? And then certainly our responsibility as parents to counterbalance that, to name things accurately, which to me is the power of naming that we all need to solve for silence, rather than it's a Vala problem or an Elaine problem.
I'm no longer going to be silent. That's it. I'm just, I am going to read and reread and be an advocate of your work. Thank you, Elaine. That was
We have been
amazing
graced
segment.
here with
Thank you.
Elaine Lin Hering, author of Unlearning Silence, How to Speak Your Mind, Unleash Talent, Live More Fully. You can follow her on Twitter at Elaine Lin Hering, and more importantly, get her new book. It is out on the 19th. It's available on Amazon for pre-order and wherever books are sold. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Elaine. Cheers.
We'll see you in the green room.
Wow. No, you know, I love that, you know, a co-founder of a CRM company ending with soft skills being important, and then, you know, making better decisions and fighting fear and being more informed, and then ultimately learning to appreciate how you can share and unlearning silence, which is, again, something I'm still a student. And again, people assume because you and I are so accessible is probably the best word I can describe. You know, we're on big stages and we're active on social and we write books and this, that, and the other, that we haven't led a silenced life. And I'm telling you, I have. I didn't find my voice until my mid-40s.
I have immigrant parents, man. I mean,
immigrant refugee.
You're quite at the table.
So, yeah,
every day
so
you're quite at the table when we
you
guests
don't speak unless spoken. Yeah. It's so. Ray, give me a 30-second summary of what you just learned in the past hour.
I think you just did it. I think we're in good shape. But I mean, look, the bottom line is like a lot of shifts are happening. A lot of the skills that we worked really hard towards, like things in tech areas that we thought were hard skills that we need to learn, are actually going to be replaced really quickly by AI. And so we have to think about the soft skills that are important that are out there. We've got other implications. And so what Clint was talking about, like, you know, at the beginning, the tip of the iceberg as to what we can do with Gen AI to get the next best action. And what Elaine was talking about on the back end was really the skills that we're going to actually have to develop if we're going to survive that. And then what Patrick was talking about really talked about, you know, how this fear of missing out is the motivation, right? I mean, it's the driver for a lot of things that we do, and it's sometimes the crazy things we shouldn't be doing. And I think that all comes back in. And so if you're listening to this issue and thinking about what your leadership options are or what you want to do next, you know, there's a lot to read here. So back to you, Val.
Totally. All right, next week we are episode 357. We have Grant Holleran, a return guest, CEO of Planful. Grant is terrific. We have Jeremy Utley, author of Idea Flow, and Kian Gohar, who's the founder and CEO of GeoLab, joining us, tag teaming, inspiring and educating us. And then we have Chris Deaver, co-author of Brave Together, Lead by Design, Spark Creativity, and Shape the Future with the Power of Co-Creation. Again, last year we had 70 authors on the show, and we're on pace to maybe having 100 authors on DisrupTV in 2024. So if you're a CEO, you're an author, you're an investor, this is where you come. So if it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.